G-Max Lightning, I believe, can just paralyze everything on the field.
Yes.
Regardless of what type it is, if it gets hit by the attack, or if its partner gets hit by the attack, everything's paralyzed. The end.
And Pikachu has that, that partner Pokemon energy where it has its own specific item to be held in game in Light Ball that boosted stats. So we are jumping into game 1 here. Again, this will be the first set of 2 we're going to have in round 4 in Salt Lake City. So Andrew Ding versus Max Simon. Andrew having the Togekiss again that we saw from Collinsville all that time ago, and Dialga and Grimmsnarl on Andrew's side, and then Zacian Butterfree for Max.
Now that is a Pokemon that I'm sure Andrew is nervous to see. I mean, the nice thing about Grimmsnarl is that due to its prankster ability, most people are running that right now on Grimmsnarl. He could try and maybe go for a paralysis off a Thunder Wave on that Butterfree, slow it down, ensure that the Dialga won't get put to sleep before it gets the opportunity to attack. Alternatively, Grimmsnarl also can learn Fake Out, which a lot of people have been teching in recently to sort of make situations like this a little bit easier. I think Andrew's biggest concern, though, going into this lead isn't actually the Butterfree, because Zacian, if it has Sacred Sword, which most do carry a fighting-type move, could just go straight for the attack into that slot. Dialga would take a ton of damage, and that would be something really unfortunate for Andrew to start this game off with.
And one of the big developments throughout the Sword and Shield era of VGC has been weakness policy Pokemon.
Oh,
so
that too.
you always have to be cognizant of that, right? You can't just go for the super effective attack. Eventually we'll learn what Dialga's held item is, but if it's holding weakness policy, that is something that would be a big reveal in game 1. Of course, there are other moves or held items that Dialga also can use effectively, but this is really what game 1 of a set in a round is what is for to find out. So the Fake Out goes into Butterfree's
Quick Guard.
Excuse me, quick guard from Zacian. So that's not the Fake Out. And Sleep Powder connects onto the Dynamax Dialga there. So this first turn of Dynamax is completely useless. So Zacian with the Quick Guard stopped all the priority attacks.
That is a unique move that, quite frankly, I have not seen on a Zacian at all. Most Zacian run 3 attacks plus a Protect. Alternatively, sometimes you'll see something like a Substitute in there, maybe even a Imprison if someone's really worried about that matchup. But that Quick Guard just putting Dialga straight to sleep and really forcing Andrew to sit here and take a couple turns of attacks. But looks like he might try to get in on that Sleep Powder action himself with that Ditto.
Yeah, it's a Sleep Powder is a pretty good move. Might as well use it myself. As the Ditto transforms into a Butterfree, Rage Powder will redirect any attacks that would be going towards the Zacian into the Butterfree instead. But for now, Zacian with that Behemoth Blade into the Ditto slot is a one-hit KO. And Ditto, obviously, by getting knocked out there, is not holding a Focus Sash.
Oh, but Dialga woke up!
Woke up on the second turn. Max Quake, but it got redirected into Butterfree, who's a flying type. So really difficult turn for Andrew there, because had the fortune of waking up, but because of Rage Powder redirecting it away, didn't do any damage.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate for that Ditto too, since a lot of times people who run Ditto run it for situations like this where your opponent just has a problematic Pokemon, and then rather try to figure out, okay, how do I beat that? You can just say, I'm gonna just borrow that for a little bit and use that Rage Powder, use that Sleep Powder for myself. A lot of Ditto also carry Choice Scarf, which could have meant that this Ditto would have been faster than the opposing Butterfree, and we've seen some interesting stuff there. But fortunately for Andrew, the fact that the Dialga woke up means that he can sort of adjust for a Rage Powder again this turn, but instead it looks like we might just be trading Behemoth Blades on these Zacian.
Yep, Zacian into Butterfree will bring Butterfree down to 1 HP because Max's Butterfree is holding the Focus Stats there, so it is able to endure any attack when it is at full HP. And now the Zacian on the other end will go into Dialga there. It is a resisted attack, so that just shows how strong the Zacian is, that it did that much damage to a resisted, or to a Dynamax Pokemon with an ineffective attack. Sleep Powder does land on to Andrew Zacian though this turn, so next turn it will be forced to take 1 turn of sleep. Max Steel Spike on this third and final turn of Dynamax for Andrew will get rid of that pesky 1 HP on the Butterfree's end and increase both defenses or the defense of both of Andrew's Pokemon by one stage.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good turn for Andrew. You know, yes, he didn't get damage down on the Zacian on Max's side of the field, and that's still something he has to worry about. Knowing that his Pokemon are at +1 defense against that Zacian does make this a little bit easier. Unfortunately for Andrew, though, his Zacian is asleep, and it looks like Max has revealed the Charizard on his side of the field, and Max has not used his Dynamax yet, which means if this is a Gigantamax Charizard, this would be an amazing opportunity to go for the Gigantamax, get that Wildfire up on the field, start dealing residual damage, take those Pokemon out. But, you know,
Exactly.
I think Andrew just realized, okay, unfortunately, this is a really unfavorable situation for me at this point. There might be some information he's trying to save, forfeiting that early, as the game wasn't officially over yet. But, you know, just recognizing, all right, this ain't it. Let's regroup in team preview, maybe think about my options and how I'm going to handle that Butterfree, because that was such a disruptive Pokemon for him in that matchup.
Yeah, there are definitely moments where it's better to, you know, obviously on our TCG end, they say a lot, know when to scoop, right?
Yeah.
So in VGC, the same rule would apply. Know when to forfeit a match so you can save some of your information. One thing that was revealed, though, is that Dialga is holding Life Orb, not Weakness Policy. So Max now has that information in case he does have Sacred Sword. He can super effectively hit the Dialga and not worry about activating any Weakness Policy.
Yeah, and that's going to make this matchup that much easier for him, since a lot of times when dealing with Pokemon like Dialga or possibly even a Solgaleo, who are, I think, the two most popular Weakness Policy Pokemon right now in the metagame, you just have to worry, like, okay, if this Pokemon goes for the turn 1 Dynamax, which we saw Dialga do, and it gets the Weakness Policy activation, you know, how much damage is it going to do on those 3 turns, knowing that Dialga is typically slower than the thing activating the Weakness Policy, so you will have those 3 turns to attack with it. So I think this makes Max's game plan going into Game 2 a little bit more comfortable. I mean, the fact that Butterfree was able to threaten Andrew's team so much at the beginning of that in the beginning of that Game 1 really just goes to show how much pressure a Pokemon like Butterfree can put on the field. You know, that being said, Andrew does have a couple of options that could make that a little bit easier. You know, we saw the Grimmsnarl with Fake Out, didn't really work out for him. You know, Togekiss is known for having Follow Me, maybe redirect with Sleep Powder that first turn so you can get Butterfree down to Sash and then try and use the fact that your Zacian is faster to just knock it out. And it looks like Togekiss is going to be that adjustment we see from Andrew out on the field.
Yeah, Togekiss and Dialga are the lead for Andrew in Game 2, and then Butterfree and Zacian for Max. This, though, the same exact lead, having Intrepid Sword, boosting its attack by 1 stage. Really the only item that Zacian would be holding because it's so helpful. It makes you stronger, and it really negates and Intimidate from a potential Pokemon on the other end. At this point, there is no priority move, so now Zacian doesn't have to worry about clicking Quick Guard.
Yeah, Zacian can go on the offense here, and like hypothetically, a Behemoth Blade into that Togekiss is going to do so much damage because of Togekiss's Fairy typing. So even if Andrew is able to protect the Dialga this turn from the Sleep Powder, it's possible that the Togekiss might just get knocked out for it. And knowing that the Butterfree has the Focus Sash item, like, you have to think to yourself, okay, how do I get through this so that Butterfree is not on the field next turn so I don't have to worry about being put to sleep?
Togekiss will follow me on this turn, so any attacks that would be targeted towards its partner will be redirected to that slot. Here is the Behemoth Blade, and there's the Berry reveal, so that will negate some of the damage from a super effective Steel-type attack coming into the Togekiss. So will it be enough to hang on? And yes, it brings it down into the red, so that just shows how strong the Zacian is that the Berry still did 90% to it there, but this Sleep Powder from Butterfree will go towards the Togekiss. Togekiss is totally fine with that because now on this turn, Dialga gets a max Rock Fall, targeting down Butterfree, obviously bringing it down to the Focus Sash, and more importantly, setting up the sand with the residual damage will knock out the Butterfree.
And that's exactly how you get around this situation. It's unfortunate that Togekiss is put to sleep, but, you know, we saw the Berry activate. It was able to redirect that 1 turn of attack for the Dialga. That was all Andrew needed to really open this game up for him. Admittedly, you know, a lot still depends on what Pokemon that Max has in the back. If that Kyogre were to make an appearance, that could mean the weather will change almost immediately. The Charizard making an appearance is interesting because you would assume that a Max Rockfall from the Dialga at this point in time would easily knock that out, but Charizard and Zacian are definitely faster than Dialga. You know, they just have higher base speeds, and as a result, Togekiss no longer able to redirect. This is that perfect time to get that G-Max Wildfire out onto the field. That plus a Sacred Sword is going to do so much damage to that Dialga. I would be very surprised if it's still hanging on at the end of this turn.
Right, Max is trying to brute force through the Dialga on this turn, knowing Togekiss is forced to stay asleep because it had not taken its first turn of sleep yet. So Togekiss went for the Follow Me, but of course not going to be able to wake up. And it's up to Dialga. Is there a max guard? No. So the Zacian and Charizard attacks will be going into that slot. Double damage to Dynamax Pokemon. That's why the Behemoth Blade does so much damage, even though it's an ineffective attack. And then G-Max Wildfire is a neutral attack onto the Dialga there. So it is not enough to knock it out, though. So this Dialga is going to get one attack off this turn with the Max Rockfall. Obviously 4 times super effective into Charizard. So that Charizard never stood a chance. And now Max is down to its final focus.
We are going to see an interesting in-between turn interaction here with the residual damage. We'll see Togekiss not only get hit by the Sandstorm, but also will be taking damage from the G-Max Wildfire. And given that is enough to secure the knockout onto that Togekiss, Andrew is now down to his last 2 Pokemon. Same thing with Max, actually. So this could be a really interesting situation if we have the Zacian coming out for Andrew and that Kyogre possibly making an appearance for Max. But it looks like instead it's going to be Whimsicott and Ditto. So Andrew making a prediction in Team Preview that he could just use Ditto's imposter ability to copy that Zacian, and he doesn't have to worry about bringing his own Zacian. And this also gives him a lot of information. You know, he just copied all of this Zacian's moves. You know, he sees the Quick Guard. He knows what else is over there. And I think that's going to give him a bit of an advantage, except for the fact that this Ditto will most likely be knocked out in one hit. So can Ditto outspeed the opposing Zacian, and can Ditto find a way to get that knockout in that single hit? It's a bit of a big ask, especially when you have Whimsicott right there to provide support with like Tailwind or maybe a helping hand or even just some additional chip damage on top of everything.
I'm thinking that since Ditto doesn't have the Focus Sash, another common item like you mentioned earlier is Choice Scarf. So at that point, Ditto or the Zacian would be faster than the other one, but because of Whimsicott's Prankster ability, Tailwind will be set up for Max's side, doubling their speed. So now Max's Zacian is faster than the Ditto version. Will be a neutral hit, but because the Ditto is brought down very low, down to 13 HP. Not enough for a knockout, though, so it will be able to get one attack off back into the Zacian, and that is a one-hit KO there.
And that means that this Dialga is now free to attack into the opposing Whimsicott, and we already know where the Focus Sash is. So that is a knockout, and Andrew is able to tie the score up 1-1 thanks to that Ditto taking that Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, that was an awesome comeback out of Andrew in that game. Yeah, for how convincing game 1 went on Max's side, to keep your spirits up, to not really get flustered and just bring back the same lead. He made the adjustment, leading Togekiss, like you mentioned, that had the Follow Me access to really negate any of that, any of the nuisance that Butterfree was causing there, because the Sleep Powder went into Togekiss instead and left Dialga to have 3 effective turns of Dynamax there. Ditto is really a pesky Pokemon to deal with if you're not prepared for it, because a lot of times when you're building a team, you're like, okay, my Zacian, my Kyogre, or in this case maybe the Charizard or Pikachu, they're my best Pokemon. They can sweep through the team. And then Ditto says, oh, that's your strategy? Then I can just take that from you.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to see how that Ditto was able to take the Behemoth Blade from the opposing Zacian. I think that just goes to show how this Ditto is trained. You know, typically when a Ditto copies a Pokemon, they only copy like the stat changes. They don't necessarily copy, like everything. The HP is always something that Ditto brings into the match. And as a result, the fact that that Ditto was trained to do that, the fact that Andrew decided to leave his own Zacian behind for the Ditto to act as a Zacian, just goes to show you you know, just the confidence going into this matchup and going into game 3. You know, you have to wonder, like, what was his thinking behind the Ditto over the Zacian? Like, what is it about his Zacian that he did not want to reveal in that game 2 and that game 1 situation? And is that going to be the winning factor going into this game 3? It could be how the Zacian is trained. You know, a lot of people aren't going max speed, max attack on Zacian anymore. You know, we're seeing a lot of like, oh, I'm going to get rid of a little bit of speed so I can be bulky enough to take a Behemoth Blade, you know. It might be possible that the Zacian has Substitute or something, which makes the Zacian versus Zacian matchup a little bit easier if you get it onto the field early enough. But, you know, I like this lead from Andrew going into game 3, you know, just respecting the threat of that Butterfree. But it looks like we have another great friend on the field joining us today.
Somebody tell Ash Ketchum that Pikachu has made it onto the stream here in Salt Lake City. Pikachu, a Pokemon that you would think, oh, it's not even fully evolved, you'd rather use Raichu, but no, because of Light Ball, Pikachu's stats actually get raised by holding that item, so it's actually a much stronger offensive pressure than what Raichu could potentially output.
Yeah, and like we were mentioning before this match started, you know, if Pikachu's had a little bit of that Gigantamax soup, you know, Pikachu's G-Max form really can just throw everything into chaos, you know, paralyzing everything on the field. And looks like, you know, we're going to get some extra little friends on the field. You know, unfortunately, as Ditto has not gone for anything.
So Ditto transforms into Pikachu, which gets the Lightning Rod ability, which will redirect the electric attack away from Togekiss into it, increasing its special attack by 1 stage. The Sleep Powder will go towards that slot, which was meant for Dialga there. But now Togekiss is free to Dazzling Gleam, which is a spread attack, hitting both of the Pokemon and breaking Butterfree's Focus Sash. So, Gabby, not only do we have 1 Pikachu in this match, but we ended up with 2 here in Game 3.
I know, and even though the Ditto is asleep, that doesn't mean that Andrew can't, you know, bring it back into his party and bring it back later to copy a different Pokemon. You have to make a couple of guesses here about sleep turns, and honestly, I think you keep the Pikachu out on the field this turn just to make sure that Max cannot target your Togekiss with any super effective electric type attacks. We saw the Volt Tackle earlier. That would have been really bad for that Togekiss. So really a great defensive play, just again showing how comfortable he is with this Ditto. And Max finding himself in a position where, assuming this Togekiss does have access to an attack like Air Slash, that Butterfree is going to go down, making it much safer for his real, actual, authentic Zacian to make another appearance.
So there is Andrew Zacian switching into the Ditto slot there. Max also switching out their Pikachu, so we might have that battle come up a little bit later again into Charizard. But Butterfree with Sleep Powder towards that Togekiss slot will connect and put it to sleep this turn, so will not be able to go for any attack. Likely an Air Slash into Butterfree to knock it out. So that was its first turn of sleep here. Now you have Charizard who can go for a G-Max attack into the Zacian, so Andrew has to be worried about that.
He really does. I think it's interesting that the Zacian made an appearance. Maybe he was worried about the double Sleep Powder into that slot. You know, if the Dialga is put to sleep, then you really are in a tough spot, as the Dialga is able to resist this Charizard a lot better than the Zacian is. But so far, no switches, just our little Pika friend coming back out onto the field, and Zacian gonna try and take the heat from this Charizard this turn.
Let's see if he can. The Pikachu will not be Dynamaxing in this set, unfortunately. Instead, it's gonna be G-Max Charizard, the much more likely Dynamax attacker there. G-Max Wildfire is super effective, obviously, into Zacian. Would also do so much damage to Togekiss as well.
But I just gotta say, I love G-Max Pikachu, and the fact that there was potential here just fills me with joy.
Yes, absolutely. Behemoth Blade from Zacian into the G-Max Charizard again, into the Pikachu. So not even worrying about the Wildfire coming in its direction, just wants to get rid of the Pikachu, which remember was Butterfree on that turn. So Andrew prioritizing that Butterfree slot to get rid of it, but G-Max Wildfire, a one-hit knockout, and Andrew's restricted Pokemon goes down with 2 Pokemon that are asleep in Ditto and Togekiss, and then the Dialga who can come out here and go for a Dynamax attacks. It is looking very strong for Max.
It is, but Andrew does have a couple of outs here. You know, a lot of them do revolve around, when does Togekiss wake up? You know, if Togekiss wakes up this turn and Dialga goes for a Protect or a Max Guard, you know, depending on if he decides to Dynamax or not, Togekiss can wake up, knock out that Butterfree, and bring Max down to his last 2 Pokemon. You know, we saw the Dialga able to take a G-Max Wildfire from this Charizard and, you know, fire back the Rock Ball to get that knockout. So really, it just comes down to this Butterfree. I mean, I think if you're Max, you have to click that Sleep Powder into the Dialga to just sort of cover the fact that if the Dialga is allowed to stay awake, then that's really, you know, not a favorable position for you. But you can't target the Togekiss yet because the Togekiss is asleep and will be moving after you. So you wouldn't be able to put that back to sleep until next turn, unless you go for the follow me play, which unfortunately did not play out.
Gigantic third turn of sleep from Togekiss there, because if it woke up, it would have redirected a Sleep Powder. But unfortunately for Andrew, it does not wake up, and the Max Quake from Charizard goes into Dialga. Knowing now that it's not weakness policy, you can hit it super effectively. And then the Sleep Powder into Dialga as well. Only really getting 1 turn of, or on this first turn of Dynamax being put to sleep. So now Max with this Charizard and Butterfree is free to, you know, keep attacking with G-Max Wildfire on this last turn of its Gigantamax.
Yeah, and knowing that all 3 of your opponent's Pokemon are currently asleep certainly does make this matchup feel a little bit comfier. Admittedly, this is the turn that Togekiss will finally wake up and hopefully go for a little bit of damage, but instead switching things up with an ally switch, maybe giving Dialga the opportunity to get 1 last attack in.
Ally switch, a nice reveal in game 3 here from the Togekiss, but
Dialga woke up.
Dialga wakes up for Max Rockfall, so only 1 turn of sleep. Togekiss was asleep the whole time. Dialga wakes up early, so it kind of evens out for Andrew there, knocking out the Butterfree and setting up the Sandstorm. Now Charizard has to worry because there is no redirection at this point for the next turn that Butterfree is gone. Dialga has 1 more turn of Dynamax available to it, so it can go for a Max Rockfall.
It could also decide to target down Max's last Pokemon, which has not been revealed yet, but one has to assume it's going to be that Zacian, given how much it did for him earlier. And then you end up in a really interesting situation that mirrors what we saw in the previous game, where there is that Ditto in the back. You know, Ditto could choose to copy that Pokemon, but instead it's going to be that Whimsicott again, making an appearance, which begs the question, you know, going into this game 3, Max brought Butterfree, Pikachu, and Whimsicott. Those are 3 supportive Pokemon, and Charizard as his main attacker. I think that's a very bold play, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to play out, especially now that Charizard is done with the Gigantamax turns.
The guts to bring no restrictors in game 3 of a set is, you know, very impressive from Max. Sunny Day revealed from Whimsicott there, which will set up the sun, boosting the damage from Charizard, and a double KO. Heat Wave connecting onto both of Andrew's Pokemon. Now it's 2-1 with just the little Ditto that could, and unfortunately, I don't think it can.
I'm trying to do some math here real quickly. You know, Ditto will probably copy the Charizard. I don't think you copy the Whimsicott, even though it's a beautiful, fluffy boy.
It sure is.
But if Ditto wakes up this turn and can outspeed the opposing Charizard, even though that Whimsicott will probably go for Tailwind like we saw it do in the previous game, never mind, you just copy the Whimsicott. And you know what? Now there are 2 fluffy boys on the field, and that's also okay as well. You know, I think that Andrew is ending the game with a little bit of a smile here, knowing that it wasn't guaranteed that the Ditto would wake up that turn. And really, Max just, again, with such a bold